If there's one thing that cartels are known for all over the world, other than the drug trade, it's their gruesome methods of torture. Reasons as to why they torture captives the way they do can be revenge, trying to get information, blackmail, scare tactics, or just a sheer display of power. From beating people up with their bare hands to using a wide variety of tools, or even shooting at point-blank range, the cartels know no limit when it comes to torturing. Here are some of the most disturbing methods of torture that cartels have used over the years. Dismemberment. In 2015, an alleged hitman for the Los Zetos cartel by the name of Marciano Chanos Milan Vasquez was arrested by Texas law enforcement agencies. Vasquez was believed to be one of the culprits in the kidnapping of a drug associate in 2013. After being released, the associate decided to testify against Chano. He claimed that Vasquez took him to an unknown location after kidnapping him. It wasn't just any location, it was the place where Vasquez was keeping a family of three, a couple and their daughter. According to the associate, he saw the family standing near a flaming barrel when his blindfold was removed. The next details shared by the witness were disturbing. He claimed that the parents were forced by cartel men to see their daughter getting dismembered by Vasquez with an axe. But that's not the only story of this sort. Cartels are known for executing their victims by using such horrific tactics. The first step in such acts is injecting adrenaline, morphine, or heroin. These substances keep the victims awake throughout the process. Then, men like Vasquez use blades, knives, and axes to chop off their limbs, one after the other. But they don't cut close to the vital organs, because then the victims will die quickly, and they wouldn't be able to achieve their goal of keeping the victim in severe pain. The pain, along with the blood and psychological shock that the victims suffer during the torture, are what satisfy the brutal cartel members. This agony forces the victim to give up any information that they have, but that doesn't stop them from dying in pain. You see, this method kills two birds with a stone for the cartel. It puts the victim through a harrowing pain and also makes the disposal of their bodies easier. If the cartel wants to send a message to their rivals or the public, then the body parts of the victims are thrown in public areas, so no one even thinks about challenging them. One of the well-known examples of this kind of torture is Israel Rincon, a cartel member. In October 2010, Rincon was just killed, but his body was dismembered because he had messed with El Chapo, the drug lord infamous for such brutal torture methods. Rincon killed the son of one of El Chapo's allies. El Chapo got Rincon tracked and picked, and the remaining time of the cartel member was no less than hell. He was tortured to the extent that he lost consciousness. But El Chapo didn't plan on letting Rincon die so quickly. A doctor was on standby to keep him alive, so El Chapo's men could brutalize him in ways one cannot even imagine. Before Rincon died, his limbs had been dismembered, and his remains were then dumped in famous city of Culiacan. You would think this is the worst the victims of cartels can go through, but wait till you hear about the next one. It's even more brutal. Use of chainsaw for beheading. One of the most famous incidents that involved this torture method happened in 2011, when Felix Gámez Garcia and his uncle Barnabas Gámez Castro were savagely beheaded. This event is also famous for being one of the first cartel executions that were uploaded on the internet for everyone to see. This video showed a person wearing a ski mask, positioning the moving blade of the chainsaw near the neck of the uncle and his nephew. Felix and Barnabas worked for the Sinaloa cartel, but were caught stealing from the drug lords. We know that the cartel bosses don't let these things slip by, so the two men paid the ultimate price by getting their heads separated from their bodies. But this isn't the only incident we can think of. In August 2008, law enforcement forces arrested a notorious drug lord, Moises Escamilla May, for beheading 12 people in Yucatan, Mexico. In another incident, 5 decomposing heads were found outside a primary school in Acapulco, New Mexico. The heads were kept in a sack, and this ignited strikes by several schools for increased violence in the region. But this didn't stop the cartels from using these heartless torture methods. 5 decapitated heads were found in an ice cooler in 2011 on the opposite side of the same country in Tamaulipas. These tactics aren't used by cartels just for the members of their rival group, but common people like journalists who report or write against them are also put through the same torture method. What has made this gruesome practice even worse over the years is that some cartels have even started performing them as a ritual for certain demands to be fulfilled. El Guiso. The next torture method on the list is known as el guiso, or the stew. Santiago Mesa Lopez, one of the most prolific criminals in Mexico, was arrested by the Mexican army in Tijuana on January 22, 2009. Lopez was commonly known as El Pozolero, or the pozole maker, and was infamous for being the cleanup man for several cartels. At the time of his capture, El Pozolero was believed to have dissolved more than 300 bodies in acid in his ranch, which was located about 70 miles from the border. Lopez rose to notoriety for being one of the first criminals to use el guiso method. El guiso method involved putting a person in a large oil drum, filling it with oil or acid, and then setting it on fire. The drum acts as a furnace for burning the victims. Although it is unknown who exactly invented this method, a few Mexican cartels became infamous for using el guiso. To make the stew, a huge barrel is filled with water and concentrated sulfuric acid. This causes the mixture to boil and reach dangerously high temperatures. Once the liquid is ready, the victims, who are still alive, are dunked in the barrel. One can imagine the agonizing pain victims would have to go through before meeting their fate of a slow death. But coming back to Lopez, his story would surprise you. Santiago Mesa Lopez was born in April 1964 in Sinaloa, Mexico. Lopez's parents were poor, so he struggled with poverty from a very young age. He started working in construction when he was just 13 to make ends meet, but in the 1990s, Lopez moved to Tijuana for better opportunities. Lopez was living an ordinary life until his sister was raped by members of a criminal organization. This put Lopez on the path of revenge as he joined the Tijuana cartel. Initially, he remained unknown, but kept climbing the ranks before catching the attention of his boss, Efrain Perez, and became his man to dispose of bodies whenever needed. Perez started paying Lopez $600 weekly to do the cleanup whenever it was needed, and that's when El Pozolero started using el guiso method. He would liquefy his victims without any trace of their bodies left behind. Lopez would put the dead bodies in a tub filled with acid and sodium hydroxide and stir the bodies in it. It took around 8 hours for the bodies to disintegrate almost completely. He also had an alternative for body parts, such as teeth or nails, that didn't dissolve in the solution. He would take them to a wasteland, burn them with gasoline, and bury them. Authorities claim that he dissolved more than 300 bodies in acid and dumped the remains in a pit on a hillside compound in eastern Tijuana. About 14,000 remains of bodies were found buried in El Pozolero's ranch after he was arrested. The method used to torture and kill the victims is called the stew because the victims are cooked in boiling liquid. When investigated, he claimed that he tried to escape from his boss, Efrain Perez, but couldn't. Lopez also told the authorities that he was forcibly recruited while working on a farm in 1996. Some senior members of the Tijuana cartel asked him to conduct an experiment with water and acid in a barrel. It is yet to be known if the claims made by Lopez are true or not, but Lopez did dispose of bodies using the el guiso method for years until he was captured. In 2012, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison and was eligible to be a free man in 2022. This angered a lot of families in Tijuana whose loved ones were believed to have been victims of El Pozolero's brutal method. So he was kept in prison, and his sentence was increased by an additional 30 years. After knowing about the El Guiso method, many cartel leaders started using it to kill their rivals and traitors. Cannibalism. Yes, you heard it right. Cannibalism has been an open secret in the narcos world in recent times. The cartel that is associated with it is known as the CJNG, led by El Mencho. This criminal organization has become one of the most notorious cartels in the country, operating in at least 35 states in Mexico and Puerto Rico. Cartels have a deeper system going on than what meets the eye. To remain competitive in the drug world, these criminal organizations need to make sure that their members can handle the violence that happens on almost a daily basis. They have to forget that they are also human beings when they kill anyone. To desensitize the newly recruited members to violence, cartels started using cannibalism. These despicable displays of public aggression are also meant to put fear in their rivals' minds. In cartels, one of the favorite techniques to torture members of the rival gangs is to cut fingers and toes. While undergoing training, recruits of different cartels have to eat dismembered fingers and move to a larger body part if they pass this test. Not eating the human body parts is not an option for the recruits, and anyone throwing up during this exercise would be forcibly made to ingest them again. The recruits also have to sleep among the dead bodies at night, so they get desensitized to death. According to some experts, this practice dismantles recruits' sense of self-identity and instills a sense of loyalty towards their cartel. Miguel Treviño Morales, or Thief 40, is an example who consumed his victims' hearts. Thief 40 performed this as a spiritual ritual, believing that this gruesome practice would make him invincible against his rivals and law enforcement. Another purpose behind this barbaric act was to warn his enemies. A hitman once revealed that Miguel wouldn't only eat the body parts himself, but would also force the others around him to do the same. Tehuacanazo. Next up on our list of the most disturbing torture methods is Tehuacanazo. During El Chapo's heavily reported trial in February 2019, some harrowing information was revealed about how the Sinaloa cartel tortured its enemies. One of the torture methods that caught everyone's attention was Tehuacanazo, Spanish for waterboarding. This harrowing method includes putting a cloth on the victim's face and pouring water over it to cause disruption in breathing. From the Spanish Inquisition to the Japanese Army during World War II, waterboarding is a punishment that's been around for centuries, but cartels have added a Mexican twist to this already painful torture technique and use carbonated water instead of normal water, which is forced down the nose of the victim. Not only this, but the water will also have chili pepper mixed in it if the cartel wants to cause greater pain and trauma to the victim. Tehuacanazo makes the person being tortured feel like they are being drowned again and again. If the cartel wants to kill the victim, then the liquid is poured on the cloth for a longer period of time, which eventually leads to death, as the victim is completely unable to breathe. Food for the pets. Rare, dangerous, and exotic animals have been a sign of wealth and luxury in the cartel world since 1980s. It started with Pablo Escobar, who even had hippopotamuses at his estate, along with other exotic animals. The cartel leaders around the world have imitated the Colombian drug lords of the late 20th century ever since. Keeping dangerous pets was both a show of power, as well as a tactic used to send threats to rivals. But Mexican authorities later revealed that the pets were fed the victims of the brutalities of different cartels. People would be thrown into the cages of starving animals. The victims would beg for their lives, but the cartel members enjoyed the scene as the dangerous animals tore their victims apart. Heriberto Lascano was one of the cartel bosses who used this torture method. Lascano was born in 1974 in Hidalgo and had a very poor background. At the age of 17, he joined the military and served in the elite special forces. These forces were trained to fight guerrillas and drug cartels. Heriberto stayed in the army for 7 years before leaving it and joining drug lords named Osiel Cardena Guillén and Arturo Guzmán de Sena in 1998 to join Los Zetas. Nicknamed C3 in Alaska, Heriberto Lascano was the most notorious drug lord in Mexico, with security forces continuously on the lookout for him. Very few cartel bosses tortured their victims as brutally as C3 did. His torture method, La Paleta, included the victim being stripped naked and beaten with a board. Heriberto also tied some of his victims to a tree and beat them until their legs broke. But the punishment didn't end there. The victims would be kept tied to the tree for 3 days until they died. C3 had a ranch with a lot of dangerous animals, like tigers, which were kept hungry for a long period of time. He was known for feeding his victims to the animals. Lascano was fascinated by the way the animals tore apart his victims and enjoyed this particular torture method. A common process included the victim being forced into the cage of the animal, while a crowd watched from the outside. C3 didn't get the taste of his own medicine because he was killed in a 2012 shootout with the Mexican military. Cartel Kitchen. The last torture method on our list is known by the name of Cartel Kitchen. According to the Mexican government, more than 60,000 people have disappeared in the country since 2006. A 2015 document from the government revealed that only 6 people were convicted for this crime. The root cause for most of these forced disappearances was the Cartel Kitchen. The kitchen plays a key role in cartels' campaigns. The cartel kitchens are nothing like what you have in home. When you enter a cartel kitchen, You see walls filled with bloody handprints, plastic cable ties, stained clothes, and machetes. Is there also a heap of ash in a cartel kitchen and underneath it, a crunch of bones? The Los Zetas cartel took over the La Galleria ranch in northern Veracruz in 2011 to use it as a kitchen and incinerate the bodies of the victims. The whole process of this torture method is different from all the others we've talked about so far. The Los Zetas cartel would track their target on the street, but wouldn't kill them. Instead of creating a bloody shootout scene on the streets, they would abduct their targets and bring them to their kitchens. Los Zetas had 12 locations which they used as their kitchens. The targets would be taken to any of the 12 kitchen locations. The cartel members would first torture the victim with different tools, causing horrendous pain. After they had extracted the information they were looking for, then it started the next phase of the torture. When the victims were of no use to them, the cartel members would then kill and cook their bodies. It is estimated that more than 60,000 people have died in the cartel kitchens in Mexico. The kidnappings done by the cartels have been for different reasons, some of which may include sex slavery, organ harvesting, forced labor, and ransom. The victims weren't just ordinary people. Even the political opponents and journalists who exposed their crimes were abducted and became fuel for the cartel kitchens. The scale of this brutal torture method can be estimated from the fact that the Mexican authorities have gone through mountains and mountains of human bones and fragments of nails and teeth in such locations. Any victim who enters the cartel kitchen goes through an immensely shocking experience psychologically. These kitchens are truly gruesome and are lurking with blood, body parts, and different tools for torture that are lying around everywhere. And before the victim can recover from the shock, their own horrendous torture starts in the same manner as for the people before them. Families of victims have claimed that the kitchen at La Galleria is not a new discovery. The authorities were forced to search the property 4 times, and every time they entered, they found new things that the previous searches had missed. From femurs to pelvises and jawbones, the kitchen was filled with human body parts. Given this, it can be said that either newer tactics of torture emerged after each search, or previous ones are implemented over and over again with the same brutality as before them.